This week, Sticks and Taxi. Webpack Labs CTAC. Public cloud is more secure. Securing containers is a focus on applications. Veracode has some information about DevOps. SecurityNow launches trusted security circles. News from AWS, Rackspace, Risk.io, Flexera, and McAfee rounds out the enterprise security news. This week, Mike Nichols, the director of products at Endgame, joins us for an interview. And we round things out by talking about Paul's, that's mine, IOC enchanting quadrants. All that and more on this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The teleprompter now has artificial intelligence, Doug, and updates itself. It's awesome. This week, and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're going to do great.
I think that people think that you and I talk like every day at night. You know, It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's kind of a bit of an exhausting week. And I think that we noticed that a little bit in the stories for this week as well.
IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team's skills up to date. IT Pro TV's team solution provides group pricing and access to their supervisor portal. You'll gain full control over your team's training schedule, see individual and group analytics, and more. IT Pro TV does IT live every day, so you know you're getting the most current IT training. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer's sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Always a pleasure to be here reporting on the enterprise security news and other topics. With me to do that is Mr. John Strand. John, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
What's going on?
Just happy to be here. No, just a good day. Good day.
It sure is. And we've got a fantastic show. First, though, make sure you visit our sponsor, IT Pro TV. That's right. You can use the discount code ES30 and receive 30% off your monthly active subscription. And you can sign up for the supervisor portal so that you can assign training modules to your employees and keep track of their progress. So make sure you do that with our fine friends at itpro.tv/enterprise security. John, let's jump right into our feature interview for this episode as Mike has been waiting patiently. Mike Nichols, the director of products at Endgame, joins us. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really great to meet you.
It's nice to meet you as well. It must feel good to be in a space that has not very much competition, right?
Yeah, we discovered this new emerging technology called endpoint security, and we're really happy to be alone in the space here.
Yes. Well, you know, and of course,
green fields, nothing but green fields, man.
It is, of course, a very crowded space, and you know, being in the product management side of the house, Mike, what are some of Endgame's like true differentiators that differentiate yourselves from the competition in this EDR space?
Yeah, the differentiators are hard to quantify when we get down to the weeds level. We can definitely talk about how each piece is different. But I like to talk, at a higher level for your viewers and for people who are worried about, why should I look at these guys versus competition? There's sort of three main focuses that make us, I think, different, and we want to pull us in. The first is really strategy. So there's lots of different models out there that describe how you could layer your security from the very, I would call it a broad but light Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain to what we prefer, which is the much more in-depth MITRE ATT&CK matrix. And from the beginning, when we first started, we built ourselves.
Yeah, John's a big fan, and I both are big fans of the MITRE ATT&CK matrix.
My bad.
Yeah, well, we are too. In fact, we just went through. MITRE just tested us as the first vendor through their like APT suite against the full attack, against the full matrix, and rated us on how we could perform against the different stages. And we think that's. I mean, I'm encouraging every vendor to try to do that. There's a lot of noise in the space where people say, I can block all threats because they can stop malware, but we all know that's a joke. What I like to see is that people get a little more, let's say, open and a little more gutsy about proving their technology. MITRE is a great way to do that. Not just saying that you can stop exploits. Well, let's go through the depth of that column and see how far you can actually go. So that's how we started. It's how we built our research and development team, and we are focused on going against the entire, not just the breadth, but also we care about the depth of that matrix, making sure we can go as deep as possible, and we're open about gaps.
So I got a question for you. It's you kind of tangentially mentioned some vendors that we're aware of, but we're not going to mention them right now. Do you guys have a practice of threatening to sue your customers who do research and find ways to bypass your product?
No, we're a pretty open culture here. In fact, we don't know. Not only do we encourage people to help us understand where gaps are, in particular, definitely, think the authors of great tools like Mimikatz are more than happy. Please help us understand how we can make our product better. That's what we look for. But we also give back a lot. We open source a lot of what we do. In fact, just this past big conference cycle, the B-Sides, Black Hat, DEF CON conference cycle, one of our malware researchers, Hiram Anderson, actually put out some open source code that actually lets you build a sort of an anti-machine learning model. It helps you make your model better by seeing how easy it is to tailor malware to get around machine learning. And we like to contribute that things back to the community so people can actually realize that adversarial machine learning is real, and that you shouldn't accept a vendor who says they're perfect. So we're pretty open about that. So
about that, what were some of the problems that you guys came up with I don't know, pure machine learning models or artificial intelligence?
Well, one of the first problems is looking at a new technology and thinking that it can solve the world. Machine learning is fantastic, and it does help us in a lot of areas, particularly around file-based attack detections. We also apply some machine learning and data science towards the analyst problem, the skill set problem, bringing natural language to help an analyst be able to ask a question and not learn some crazy syntax or get certified in Endgame to use the product. But it's not the only solution, right? I mean, the reasons that old tried and true technologies still exist because they are useful. So we believe, in the same way you layer the attack matrix, you should layer your technologies. And machine learning is not the banner you wave that say that it stops everything. Machine learning is a new technology, and we embrace it, and we're very good at it. But it's not the only technology we bring to bear. There's also the understanding of the adversary, technique preventions, and process injection and exploitation, and on and on.
All right, so all joking aside, kind of putting facetiousness away, I think people understand who we're basically talking about here. But one of the questions I have for you is whenever we're doing tests for customers, it is very difficult for us at the end of that assessment to talk about a technology that uses artificial intelligence or machine learning to enable an analyst to make better decisions, compared to somebody that says that they're doing all artificial intelligence all the time and it's magic and it's a silver bullet. And it becomes a really big education problem, right? Because on one side, you have a group of people that say that they have finally got the holy grail, the silver bullet of computer security. On the other side, you've got a group of people that are saying, hey, security is hard, but we're going to come up with some technologies that'll use these same types of algorithms to make it a little bit less hard. How do you actually sell that to management effectively?
You hit the nail on the head on a key problem. I think it's almost criminal the way that some companies will outwardly almost, let's say, bend the truth, not quite lie, but outwardly bend the truth to executives and get themselves. Any meeting a CISO takes with a vendor is expensive, right? It's a cost of their time, it's a cost of their team's time, especially when you move into evaluation. So claiming.
Remember, you can always lie, just as long as you quote Gandhi. If you quote Gandhi, you can get away with any lie you want.
Yeah, or quote some, you mentioned testing, quote some tests that are still focused on sort of AV file-based problems and say that's all security now.
Oh, you're kidding me. Yeah, the I'll have no problem calling out NSS Labs. What a load of garbage that was.
John has some very strong feelings about NSS Labs, not necessarily shared by the rest of us on the show. Maybe, perhaps, but John's not shy with his feelings for NSS Labs testing.
The views of John Strand are not necessarily the views of Security Weekly, but then again... They might be.
Yes. Sorry, Mike, continue.
Yeah, what I would say about testing is that I think testing so far it's useful in the fact that someone needs to start somewhere. So the tests we have at least give you a starting point where if you don't pass these, then you shouldn't even talk to the vendor in the first place. But again, not to keep gloating on MITRE, but this deeper matrix approach at testing, a true attack across every stage, is how I would like executives and their teams to start testing. But to your point of how do you sell that, I mean, what we would say, again, we bring, again, machine learning to the analyst problem, but we don't solve the people problem. In fact, I talk about the fact that we elevate an analyst, we don't replace an analyst. I think anybody who tells you they can replace or cut is crazy. This is a very, very difficult space. The domain is constantly changing. And to say that you can replace an analyst, I think is, again, it's insulting to the men and women that are in a profession right now, stopping the true threats. So we talk about elevating and where it works. So we think that elevating analysts is making their time shorter. If I want to be able to figure out how this attack happened and where else it is, I shouldn't have to know that the syntax is, start dot process and there's an ampersand here and some quotes go here. I should just say, where did this come from? Like I would talk to a person and get the data, but I still need to interpret the data. We can help with it. But we can't replace it.
Mike, along those lines, a question I think ties in is how do you, in your role, and I've worked with product managers in the past, how do you balance what customers want versus what you believe they need in the space of endpoint detection and response?
The good thing is we have some strong sort of strategic leadership in the company. Our CTO is Jamie Butler, who started at Mandiant, then went to FireEye, and is now in our company. Brings a lot of domain expertise. And
also, he has a little bit experience in like rootkits and backdoors, just a little bit.
Yeah, just some slight.
He may have written the book on the topic, but whatever.
Yeah, I get to leverage, guys like him to figure out, the strategic piece of where is the market going that they're not expecting. Customers are always going to ask for things that are useful, but a lot of times they're more reactive to their pain points, is more so than reactive to the new threats on the horizon. Most, I'm sure you've seen this, right? Most companies that we're dealing with, they're still battling threats from a few years ago, let alone what's sort of the newest on the rise. The prevalence of macro attacks now, the prevalence of in-memory only attacks, we haven't found a lot of companies that are already focused on that. So they're more worried about how do I make file-based attacks faster? Can you give me, can you automatically extract the IOCs? Can you tell me where else this file is? And we can help with those features, but the really lean forward sort of strategic features come from definitely from our leadership, like our CTO and others. And then of course, market analysis, and I used to be a defender in the space. I was in a large government SOC for many years and Army Intel. So our whole team is sort of built from people who did this job and now are helping to build a product. We're not just coming to build it without any understanding of the domain.
Now, Mike, the inevitable question, after customers ask, well, how can you help me? And they ask for what John was speaking about, for artificial intelligence that just does their job for them because they don't understand it and they just want it to be completely automated. Maybe they're asking for that. But the kind of next line of questioning is, how does EDR impact my performance and reliability of the host that I'm installing it on? And I'm sure it's not the first time you've been asked that question.
Yeah, I mean, the positive thing is, I think with the news cycle as it has been for the past 2 years, they realize the impact of their reliability and their performance is much greater if they make their front page of the Wall Street Journal or if they, have their whole systems locked up by ransomware. So there's been less of a pushback on another agent. Mm-hmm. There is always the question, though, right? They're like, I have too many agents, and the question always comes up of, can you help me replace? But they do understand, at least now. I used to be in the network space for many years, and now it's much more understood that I have to have something on the endpoint. And that's to do more than just a black box. Tell me there's a problem. I have to allow my analyst to dig in and see, where else this problem might have gone. How did this problem get here? So I can stop the root cause. I don't just keep, playing whack-a-mole on the challenge, but actually stop the root cause of the problem. And so we don't get pushback as much. It also helps that. If I could pitch for a second, that we've developed our agent to be a single thing. It's a single agent. It runs very lightweight. It's only about 1.5% CPU usage on the endpoint. So that helps in the story to prove to them that we're not overwhelming and that we don't cause user impact. But the positive thing, well, maybe it's not positive, but the shift of thinking of even the operations teams are now on board with more security focus, because security's made it up to the board and they're getting pushed down from on high.
Interesting. And when we talk about EDR, of course, we talk about detection, but a lot of vendors in the space are in the protection phase as well. What do you do different in the protection aspect of it?
Yeah, so we're there as well, and you're exactly right that even our sort of completely EDR focused testings that we're doing with customers, they still have a set of samples they want us to prevent, especially when it comes to something like ransomware or file-based or file space attacks. One of the biggest things we've done from the beginning is, I hate to use the word gap, but the focus we've had is that again, most of the newest technologies, even the sort of buzzwords of the next gen AVs, are focused on file-based problems, and we're seeing a great trend where many problems now are not file-based. They might start with an initial doc or something that gets exploited, but then they live off the land with existing tools that are on the OS, or they inject code in memory and live there. So our protection focus, although we're pretty kick-ass at the on-disk problem. In fact, we're proving ourselves pretty well if you go check out VirusTotal on how our model works there. But we also put a lot of focus on the next stage, right? What happens if it's in memory only? Can we stop that? We have a lot of protections around that piece. We've put some patented technology into exploitation to actually stop it as early as we can. And then across the rest of the kill chain, we look for credential theft, we look for privilege escalation, we look for the establishment of persistence, lateral movement, discovery. We're looking at more. At finding more, and if you want to flip the toggle to stop it, stopping more across that whole, again, the whole breadth of the attack matrix, not just one column and saying, "Hey, we stopped files, so all other threats must be contained."
Well, there was a great quote that hit last week on Twitter. I think it was Dan Kaminsky. He said that amateurs talk about threats, or amateurs talk about specific attacks, and professionals talk about vectors. And that's one of the reasons why we're such huge fans of the MITRE framework. Instead of actually trying to talk about specific threat actors and what they do, how can we look at their methods and how they're actually doing, exactly like you said, the privilege escalation, lateral movement, in order to start detecting them? Because it's a much smaller universe of techniques that are currently being used, rather than trying to identify all the different types of malware and the bad guys behind that malware.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think attribution, unfortunately, was one of those fads that pushed us down the wrong path in the industry. That, as well as claiming that IOC searching was quote unquote threat hunting. Now that we're, to your point, we realize that there's a finite amount of techniques that you can use to gain control of an operating system. If we can monitor for those and provide access to be able to actually hunt for those things, you greatly reduce the attack surface, and you don't have to worry about, is it APT 1, 2, 3, 4. Ultimately, does that matter to the organization as much as it does that you stop the threat in the first place?
Yep.
We also talk about response, Mike, and that's where I hate to use the term, but the rubber meets the road, and where a lot of people struggle, right? They're like, hey, I can detect all these things, I can even prevent all these things, but how do I get my SOC analyst to help respond, and then how do I escalate? What is the, and I feel like people kind of don't incorporate that in their evaluation of technology and their overall strategy enough, in that it's kind of similar when I used to work in vulnerability management. It was one thing to go find all the vulnerabilities, but how do we get people to fix them? It's the same thing in this space. How do we get people to respond to the threat and then ultimately fix the problem? And you kind of suffer from the same issues in both of these different verticals in security. So how does Endgame help in that situation?
Yeah, I would agree with you that response is a hard thing to get companies to test, especially if they're outside of a lab environment. People have a lot of tendencies to not want to impact endpoints. They'll find a problem and then they'll say it's somebody else's issue to go respond to. The good news for us is, we started in the sort of hunt and IR space. We had to build a lot of responses and fast action sort of pivots there in the beginning before we pulled ourselves into the detection response and prevention side. And so, the first thing is just guiding analysts to what they should do. So, of course, in the interface, if there's an alert that pops up, we give you the most likely next courses of action, whether it's a kill process or delete the register key or delete the file or whatever those things could be. But again, kind of focusing on the differentiation of us, how we focus more on the attacks that are now more prevalent. With the rise of in-memory problems, and another response action I think is not as appreciated as it should be is things like suspending a thread. We see, Dridex injected into Explorer, and you have, Chinese APTs injecting into SVC host. And, if you go and just kill that process on a remediation action, you might blue screen the box. And if that box is processing transactions or has a customer database, it actually could be more expensive to the organization to bring that box down than it would be to let the adversary stay for another, couple minutes while you figure it out. So we have it as well.
No. It's perfectly cool to kill the local security authority subsystem service. That's fine.
Yeah. No harm there.
Yeah. kill a web server at a company like Amazon or something, right? But when we suspend a thread, what we do is you guys know this, but you pause that at the adversary's injection, but you let the process still run. That retains the data, so that information is there, so we can then go retrieve the strings or actually dump that section of memory for our, if you have a serious IR person, they can dig in and figure out where that true problem is and get, memories. I love it. It's like the holy grail. Everything's free and clear. I can see what the adversary is trying to do. So we try to do as much as we can to empower that later stage as well, that IR stage, and on top of all that, we just, the typical, make sure that our product is extremely extensible, full open API. The data is completely open and available. We have tons of scripts that people have shared with us from our customer base that use, they've incorporated open source tools like volatility. We've worked with Jared Atkinson to incorporate power forensics into our product as well through this. So the ability to extend ourselves to fit into your current IR workflow is also a key piece of the product.
Yeah, that was actually my next question along the lines of integrations. Where are the best success stories you've seen with the integrations? As I'm sure no one contacts you and says, hey, can we integrate from vendor land? I know that's a daily struggle for product managers today, but where are the success stories?
Yeah, I mean, the ones I like are the ones that maybe aren't the massive dollar success stories, like the power forensic story. The fact that that was written and the extensibility that has to be able to use as a module on top of PowerShell, and the fact that we can roll that into our product so that a person can easily grab the shim cache or the MFT or whatever they need is really cool. But from a product standpoint, of course, ticketing systems are even higher than ticketing systems, but now these sort of IR guided systems, things like Resilient, being able to integrate into those. To your point of not replacing an analyst, but helping them do better when they have a sort of a workbook built for a tier 1 or tier 2, being able to integrate our data into that so that they can then check the box and say what's the next step is really important to our customer base. So we put a lot of emphasis into those things. So I guess personally think that those types of workflow type integrations are the most productive for our customers, and SIMs and on and on. But I think the cool ones right now are those workflows and sort of guided systems.
So one of the things, I don't know if you have to leave right away, but I would love to get your impressions on the Styx and Taxi, like the idea of sharing cyber threat intelligence and Yara. I know you guys have had some blog posts in the past, and one of them that I loved is somebody was talking in the industry about how you can do hunt teaming with Yara. And you guys had a series, I think it was a 3-part series, and it was basically like, look, if you're trying to do hunt teaming and you're using like Styx, Taxi, and Yara, then you're really not doing hunt teaming. And I'd just like to get your whole opinion on like Styx, Taxi, Yara, threat intelligence sharing, what it's supposed to look like, how do we do it, and how do we standardize?
Well, I'll take the first part of how it works. I mean, I think IOC sharing and IOC searching it should be a key part of the SOC. It should be a key part of your security workflow. We don't think it's hunting. It's searching. Hunting is finding that unknown thing, defining the IOCs, and then starting that process. So we like to talk a lot about discovering an IOC and then pushing it into that framework. It is crucial, though. You need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to say, I found a register key. Has anybody else ever used this? I found an IP. Where else is that? So being able to pivot on IOCs is extremely important. Integrations with things like Styx and Taxi, we use that in our product. For example, there's lots of big organizations, as FSISAC, the EISAC, that use this data. So it behooves us and our customers to be able to incorporate that type of information. But I would caution any executive at calling that protection or calling it hunting. It's more like searching. It's driving, looking in the rearview mirror is a good analogy. I would call it necessary for your security organization, but not sufficient to solve the threat, right? To solve the attack problem. As far as standardization, I don't have a dog in the hunt on who we should choose, but we need a standard. Styx Taxi has proven itself to be a relatively good standard. I know there's others that are sort of vying out there, and I just think we need to pick one as an industry across the board and use that, because that's the best way for us to share the intelligence across the entire base.
Well, and I think largely it's a perception thing too. And the way you've described it, Mike, is it's more of a destination as a result of discovering IOCs. And I think where people use it wrong is they look at it in reverse, like, oh, threat intelligence should just tell me that I have this problem in my network. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that.
And I think that's fundamentally built on the. Yeah, and I think it's fundamentally built on the belief that if you can enumerate all badness, you're not going to have to worry about badness anymore. And I think that that's just incredibly problematic in the industry. You look at antivirus, it was blacklisted technologies. Firewalls, we were going to try to blacklist IP addresses at the edge of the networks. And now with this, we're continuing down this blacklist approach. While I agree, whenever you're looking at some things like ransomware, you want to see if it's on your network. Yeah, I can see the usefulness in that, but I don't think it's nearly as useful as being able to do a query across your entire environment looking for anomalies within the consistency of all of your workstations across everything.
Yeah, and we've seen and one thing we talk about is the way that far faster than this dollar of sort of offense beating a dollar defense. The attacker has commoditized their work so quickly. You look at Drydex, a consumer-focused banking attack where it used a brand new injection technique, right? Atom bombing was only a proof of concept, never used in the wild, and then it hits that. We used to never see that. That used to only be the subject of the nation states. So to the point of SOX focusing on years old technology, they're still looking at blacklisting of this, set of problems, not realizing that polymorphism was, it's been old for years. And the hashes doesn't matter. The hash is different every time. The IP domains, dying DNS, how long has that been around? So unfortunately, it's an educational part of our job of trying to talk to the security team, saying your program needs to elevate and move towards the newer attacks that are actually maybe a little bit old, but also focus on the fact that these attacks that you have no way to stop now are now made its way to the crime web groups, and they're going to be even more commoditized soon.
Absolutely. Mike, any product news from Endgame that you'd like to tell our listeners about?
Well, I think the most recent thing about Endgame is that we just got some. Well, it's funny because we just talked about it, but it is important that we get through that. I mentioned earlier that testing is a key part of at least that initial gate of should I look at these problems. So the sort of the biggest recent things we've done is putting our model inside a VirusTotal. So if you have a VirusTotal intelligence account, or even if you don't, you can actually go look at how we rate a sample versus how I think it's 60 some odd other vendors are there rating samples. That's only one part of our product. It's only sort of file focused, but it's interesting. It's a good way, I think, to initially vet the vendors you want to bring into your test. AV Comparatives is another testing organization that we recently went through and had a very high efficacy rate there of 99.5% and beat, not naming vendors, but you can go look and beat out some other vendors in the space. But again, I think the biggest thing you're going to see from us very soon is, now that we've been through this MITRE conversation, we want to actually publish. We're working with MITRE to put that out there in the world and kind of challenge other vendors to go against this as well. That it's not about the efficacy of how many files can you find that are in my malware trove, but it's more about when the attack takes place. Where inside of that chain of attacks are you actually able to stop and find the problem, and where do you have deficiencies in the ability to actually see this? So I think that next thing from us you're going to see is a lot of push on the MITRE attack matrix and this round that we've been through, sort of the first vendor to go through their testing.
Yeah, that's excellent. We actually are doing a webcast on that very topic with Mike. We'll be talking about how to evaluate and test EDR products and protection products on the endpoint. So look for that if you're not already subscribed to the Security Weekly Insider, securityweekly.com/insider. If you're on that mailing list, you'll get notifications about our webcasts. Mike, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
With that, we're going to take a short break, come back and talk about the enterprise security news. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.